How to Read and Understand the Biblical Prophets by Peter J. Gentry, Chapter 4. The Purpose of the Oracles Concerning the Foreign Nations. In this chapter, we deal head-on with a fundamental question that arises in the minds of many readers of the Old Testament prophets. Why are there so many long, boring speeches concerning all kinds of countries and nations in the ancient world that are apparently entirely irrelevant to us today? Each of the three major prophets, Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Ezekiel, contains such speeches. In Isaiah, these oracles cover chapters 13 through 27. In Jeremiah, chapters 46 through 51 are devoted to the foreign nations. In Ezekiel, chapters 25 through 32 concern non-Israelite peoples. Taken together, the space devoted to these oracles range somewhere between 12 and 23% of these books, a significant portion of the overall story. In the Book of the 12, also known as the Minor Prophets, a number of the books are completely focused on just one of the foreign nations. Obadiah focuses on Edom, Jonah and Nahum on Nineveh, the Assyrians, Habakkuk on the Babylonians, and Zephaniah on the Cushites, southern Egypt and Sudan, while Amos covers 6 foreign nations. Importance of the Song of Moses. Like most things in the prophetic books, the oracles concerning the nations are explained by the book of Deuteronomy, particularly chapter 32, which contains the Song of Moses. At the conclusion of Deuteronomy, in fact, at the conclusion of the entire first 5 books we call the Pentateuch, Moses summarizes everything in a catchy song, although modern musicians have failed to recognize it as such. In Deuteronomy 32, Moses sums up the current history of Israel and predicts the future history of Israel right through to Revelation 22, the end of the Bible. We see in the song that the relationship of the foreign nations and their future is connected directly to the future of Israel, as we ought to expect from the covenant promise to Abraham in Genesis 12, 1 through 3. Given the role of this song in portraying much of redemptive history, we must try to understand how it relates to the long sections on the foreign nations in the prophets. As usual, we need to begin by observing the literary structure, since we can construct from it an overview of the whole song, and this, in turn, will determine our understanding of individual lines and statements. This poem is not easy to divide into sections or stanzas. The following division is based on analyzing Hebrew poetry in the manner described by M. P. O'Connor, and also by the linguistic science of discourse grammar, an approach that considers grammatical markers that function above the boundaries of individual clauses and sentences and operate at the larger level of the text as a whole. Yahweh and Israel are married by virtue of the covenant of Sinai. But Israel will cheat on Yahweh by serving idols and practicing social injustice. So the song is a kind of lawsuit where Yahweh, the offended party, mixes accusations, exhortations, and oaths that promise exile and judgment on Israel, the offending party, all as clearly defined by the covenant document agreed upon by both parties. See Deuteronomy 28. Chart 4.1. Outline of Deuteronomy 32, the Song of Moses. Stanza 1, Faithful God, Faithless People, verses 1 through 6. A. Invocation of Witnesses, verse 1. B. Blessing of the song's teaching, verse 2. C. Theme, describing the character, greatness of Yahweh, verse 3. D. Innocence of offended party, guilt of defendant, verses 4 through 6. How can kindness be treated this way? Stanza 2. Cross-examination shows favor of Yahweh to Israel, verses 7 through 14. A. Cross-examination 1, Yahweh's electing love, verses 7 through 19. B. Cross-examination 2, Yahweh's electing love, verses 10 through 14. Stanza 3. Denunciation and judgment of Israel, verses 15 through 25. A. Israel grew prosperous and rebelled, forgot God, verses 15 through 18. B. Yahweh is angered by Israel, verses 19 through 20. C. Yahweh invokes retributive justice, verses 21 through 23. They provoke him with a no God. He will provoke with a no people. D. The covenant curses are invoked upon Israel, verses 24 and 25. Stanza 4. Israel's and the nation's perceptions of events, verses 26 through 38. A. Complete destruction of Israel was justified, but not carried out, verses 26 and 27. B. Calamity due to covenant curses, not to enemies' power, verses 28 through 30. C. Enemies' worship of false gods leads culture to destruction, verses 31 through 33. D. Yahweh will judge enemies and show his people compassion, verses 34 through 36. After leaving them to the consequence of their idolatry, verses 37 through 38. Stanza 5. The vindication and vengeance of Yahweh, verses 39 through 43. A. Yahweh swears to take vengeance on his enemies, verses 39 through 42. B. Yahweh promises to atone for the land of his people, verse 43. The song opens with Moses calling the heavens and the earth as legal witnesses. The song brings a benefit to hearers as significant as rain showers that cause growth. Moses' theme is the greatness of the name, i.e., the being and character of Yahweh. Stanza 1d shows that Yahweh has been faithful and kind in the covenant relationship, but Israel has not. The offended party, Yahweh, asks, "How can kindness be treated this way? It is like biting the hand that feeds you." Stanza 2 begins the cross-examination and goes back to the origins of the nations. There, Israel was marked out for special love and treatment by the Creator God. The cross-examination continues in stanza 2b, where Israel's recent history is recounted using metaphors of birds caring for their young. Finding Israel in the desert is a reference to the Exodus. During the desert journey and in the land of Canaan, Yahweh provided richly for Israel's welfare. Stanza 3 indicts Israel as in a case in court. The nation prospered and in prosperity forgot their God. There are different words in Hebrew for to forget. One entails a mental lapse, the other a moral lapse. Here, Moses is talking about a moral problem. The matter of forgetting God is the subject of Moses' preaching in Deuteronomy 6 through 11, especially 8:11 through 17. Take care lest you forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments and his rules and his statutes, which I command you today, lest, when you have eaten and are full and have built good houses and live in them, and when your herds and flocks multiply, and your silver and gold is multiplied, and all you have is multiplied, then your heart be lifted up, and you forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, who led you through the great and terrifying wilderness with its fiery serpents and scorpions and thirsty ground where there was no water, who brought you water out of the flinty rock, who fed you in the wilderness with manna that your fathers did not know, that he might humble you and test you, to do you good in the end. Beware lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand have gotten me this wealth. ESV. Forgetting God entails arrogance. It's to look at our health, family, job, property, and success and say, who needs the Lord? I am getting on fine by myself, thank you. In stanza 3c, Yahweh invokes retributive justice. It is the basis for all the social justice in the entire Pentateuch, or the Torah. Retributive justice means that when someone wrongs another, exact repayment must be made. The repayment must be as much as, no more than the amount of damage caused or wrong done. Leviticus 24:17 through 22. In this particular situation, Israel has angered and provoked Yahweh by serving no gods, non-entities. So Yahweh will anger and provoke Israel by no peoples, i.e., the foreign nations. We see God's plan concerning the foreign nations in relation to Israel beginning to unfold. Yahweh invokes the covenant curses upon Israel in stanza 3d. His actions are not the capricious wrath of a vindictive deity, but part and parcel of the agreement that Israel joyfully and willingly made with Yahweh at Sinai, and in the expanded and revised form in Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy 28 spells out the blessings for covenant loyalty and the curses for cheating on one's covenant partner. The last part of stanza 4 is extremely significant. Yahweh is tempted to completely erase the nation of Israel from the face of the earth, and only one thing halts him from pursuing his fully justified line of action. He does not want the enemy nations believing that they can conquer Israel by their own prowess and military power. The final covenant curse is exile, which entails God's handing his people over to some foreign nation and allowing them to capture the Israelites and take them into captivity. The enemy nation will conclude for a time that they have captured Israel because their God, or gods, are bigger and more powerful than Yahweh. When the Assyrians come and conquer all the cities of Judah, this is exactly what they initially said. Thus shall you speak to Hezekiah, king of Judah. Do not let your God, in whom you trust, deceive you by promising that Jerusalem will not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Behold, you have heard what the kings of Assyria have done to all lands, devoting them to destruction. And shall you be delivered? Have the gods of the nations delivered them, the nations that my fathers destroyed? Gozan, Haran, Rezeph, and the people of Eden who were in Telassar? Where is the king of Hamath, the king of Arpad, the king of the city of Sepharvim, the king of Hena, the king of Eva? Isaiah 37:10-13 ESV. Stanza 4 of Moses' song is difficult to understand, mainly because we have to carefully track the pronouns and the people to whom they refer. The foolish nation is Israel, as in verse 6. Israel does not understand that the only reason for their defeat by nations much more powerful is their covenant violation. It is not because the gods of the foreign nation are superior to Yahweh. Then imagery of grapevines is used to show that the fruit comes from the root. A civilization may appear to be grand and glorious, but if it is built on false gods or idols, it will not last. It is doomed to destruction. Sodom and Gomorrah produced the best grapes in the entire land, yet their civilization was built on social injustice. This is the poison mentioned in verses 32-33. So stanza 4, C through D, shows that Yahweh will bring destruction to the foreign nations who have built civilizations on false gods and will judge Israel for her covenant infidelity. In the last stanza, stanza 5, Yahweh makes an oath and solemnly swears. What will he do? Based solely on his own character, he will punish the foreign nations for idolatry. He will rescue Israel, and he will atone for his land. Throughout all the stanzas of this song run two themes. One, negatively, God will bring judgment upon the arrogant idolatry of the foreign nations. And two, positively, he will fulfill the Abrahamic covenant by using Israel to bring deliverance and salvation to the rest of the world. God called Abraham and blessed him so that he might bless all the nations of the world. Acts 3:25-26. This song and the messages in the prophets concerning the foreign nations would bring huge comfort and encouragement to the people of God. The oracles show that Yahweh controls and governs not just Israel but the entire world. He is sovereign over all nations. Only Yahweh is sovereign. He alone defines what is right and wrong. He alone makes future plans that shall certainly come to pass, and he alone acts in history. No one and no nation can challenge his right, spurn his will, or thwart his actions. When an encouragement to the Israelites as they watched What an encouragement to the Israelites as they watched the events played by superpowers on the stage of history. Messages concerning the foreign nations in Isaiah 13 through 27. The sections concerning the foreign nations in Isaiah are found in chapters 13 through 27. Although many commentators and translations of the Bible speak of oracles against the foreign nations, it is better to translate the preposition in Hebrew using the word concerning, i.e., oracles concerning the foreign nations. The reason for this is that each one of the messages not only announces future judgment for a particular nation, but also indicates how it may find deliverance by seeking refuge in Zion. Thus, the term against does not adequately represent the content of these passages. There are 15 oracles in Isaiah 13 through 27, arranged in 3 groups of 5. Here, we can briefly summarize the first 5 oracles to show how God plans to judge the nations for arrogant idolatry, and also how he calls and invites them to find salvation through Israel, and particularly through a future king of Israel. Foundational to the flow of thought, here are the covenants Yahweh made with Abraham and David, since the covenant made at Sinai has been violated and is now at an end. We will briefly consider the literary structures of the first 5 oracles concerning the foreign nations to see how the nation's relationship to Zion becomes central to their blessing and judgment, in accordance with Genesis 12, 1 through 3. Oracle concerning Babylon, Isaiah 13, 1 through 14, 27. A. The day of Yahweh, 13, 2 through 16. B. Overthrow of Babylon, 13, 17 through 22. C. Restoration of Yahweh's people, 14, 1 through 2. B. Overthrow of Babylon, 14, 3 through 23. A. The end of Assyrian power, 14, 24 through 27. As is common in Hebrew literature, this oracle concerning Babylon and Assyria, 2 world powers associated at that time, is divided into 2 larger subunits. Isaiah 13, 2 through 22 and 14, 3 through 27, Isaiah 14, 1 through 2, occurs at the center of a chiastic structure that portrays Israel as restored, and the nations among it as male and female servants. This second point may be construed as many of Jesus' disciples understood it. They foresaw Israel on top of all nations subject to it. However, since Isaiah 14, 1 through 2 should be interpreted in light of Isaiah 38 through 55 and 56 through 66, this is misrepresentation. First, chapters 38 through 55 introduce a future servant who will do for Israel what she has failed to do for herself in service to Yahweh. Second, Isaiah 54:17 clearly demonstrates that the servant will spawn servants as a result of his finished work. Finally, chapters 56 through 66 declare that these future servants will include eunuchs and foreigners who function as Levites and priests in the restored worshiping community on Mount Zion. Thus, in 14, 1 through 2, Isaiah baits his readers by speaking of the inclusion of the Gentiles. Oracle concerning Philistia, Isaiah 14, 28 through 32. The oracle concerning Philistia also divides into 2 sections, each half of which is repeated, creating an overall A-B structure. Following this pronouncement of judgment upon the Philistines, the prophet announces future safety for the wretched in Zion. A. Future destruction for the Philistines, 14:29. B. Future safety for the wretched in Zion, 14:30. A. Future destruction for the Philistines, 14:31. B. Future safety for the wretched in Zion, 14:32. At the beginning of this oracle, the Philistines are told not to celebrate because the rod that struck them is broken. Using mixed metaphors involving plants and different kinds of snakes, the oracle warns them of a future ruler who will force them to submit. While some scholars associate this with a coming Assyrian king, others see a future descendant of Ahaz. Although the interpretation of several details is uncertain, The main points are clear. With the death of the king, whether Judean or Assyrian, the Philistines are not to think they have escaped judgment. God promises safety for those in Zion, but warns of total destruction for the nations who have not sought refuge with the anointed king who rules in Zion. Oracle concerning Moab, Isaiah 15:1 through 16:14. A. The sudden destruction of Moab, 15:1. B. The lament of the Moabites, 15:2 through 4. C. Grief over Moab, 15:5 through 9. D. A plea for safety in Zion and Moab's pride, 16:1 through 6. B. The lament of the Moabites, 16:7 through 8. C. The grief of the Lord over Moab, 16:9 through 12. A. The imminent destruction of Moab, 16:13 through 14. All three of the topics found in Isaiah 15 and 16 are dealt with twice, and although the structure in which they are presented and represented is not a perfect chiasm, 16:1 through 6 is clearly central. There we find this remarkable statement, "And a throne will be established in kindness, and one will sit on it in faithfulness, in the tent of David, judging and seeking justice, and swift in righteousness." Verse 5. This short declaration promises a descendant of David whose rule will exhibit perfectly all the instructions in the covenant. The word pairs kindness, faithfulness, and justice, righteousness are split in both cases over parallel lines that form bookends for the central statement, offering another example of the latter word pair occurring at significant points within the literary sections in which they are found. The oracle concerning Moab is emotionally charged. Not only the nation itself, but Yahweh also is grieved over the judgment of Moab. Moab is commanded to pay tribute to the commander of Israel because only there will it find safety. Yahweh calls the people of Moab my fugitives, 16:4, and commands Zion to allow the fugitives to stay with her, although pride unfortunately prevents them from doing so. The focus of the chiastic center of the oracles, however, is on the social justice established by the Davidic king. Oracle concerning the superpowers, Northern Kingdom and World, Isaiah 17:1 through 18:7. A. The superpowers of the world, 17:1 through 3. B. Judgment on the Northern Kingdom, 17:4 through 6. C. People will turn from idols to Creator, 17:7 through 8. B. Judgment on the Northern Kingdom, 17:9 through 11. A. The superpowers of this world, 17:12 through 18:7. Like the first oracle, Isaiah 13:1 through 14:27, and fourth, 17:1 through 18:7, consists of two corresponding sections, A, B, and B, A, that are placed on either side of a central section, C. The first section, A, focuses on destruction brought to Syria and the northern kingdom by the eastern and western superpowers of the world, Assyria and Nubia. The last section, A, takes up the topic again and shows that this terror will be limited by God. The section B deals specifically with the judgment on the northern kingdom. The fourth section, B, matches the second and gives the reason for this judgment. In the central section, C, metaphors from the agricultural harvest in 17:5 through 6 anticipate the salvation of a remnant which is portrayed in 17:7, not in particularistic terms, but in terms of humanity in general, man. Oracle concerning Egypt, Isaiah 19:1 through 26. A. The smiting of Egypt in general terms, 19:1 through 15. B. The healing of Egypt, 19:16 through 25. A. The smiting of Egypt in detailed terms, 20:1 through 6. Alec Motyer correctly observes that the oracle concerning Egypt is divided into three parts, with the healing of Egypt at the center of the chiasm. The future portrayed for Egypt involves 5 cities, including Heliopolis, which will speak the language of Canaan. The prophet also envisions an altar to Yahweh in the midst of Egypt and a memorial pillar of stone at the border, the latter similar to the one set up by the newly established nation of Israel in the book of Joshua, 22:10 through 11. Accordingly, in the future, Egypt will become a country like Israel. The climax appears in Isaiah 19:24 through 25. In that day, Israel will be the third, with Egypt and Assyria, a blessing in the midst of the earth, whom the Lord of hosts has blessed, saying, Blessed be Egypt, my people, and Assyria, the work of my hands, and Israel, my inheritance. ESV. Here, Isaiah predicts that the renewal and restoration of Zion will involve taking Israel's worst enemies and incorporating them into one people of God, giving names to Assyria and Egypt that were once used only to Israel. So read these long messages concerning the nations with great interest. God is sovereign over the world. He will hold the nations accountable for worshiping the creation instead of the Creator. The only form of deliverance and salvation is found in Israel and in her coming king. It requires faith to believe this. It is like saying to China or the United States, a ruler is coming to Liechtenstein. You will find the resolution of all your problems in him.